In the grand scheme of cosmic real estate, Dyson sphere cities were the penthouses of the universe. A shimmering shell built around a star, where energy was cheap and space was plenty, assuming you didn't mind the occasional murderous void dwellers. Welcome to New Haven, the equivalent of a gaudy space mansion with an infestation problem. And I'm not talking about the neighbor's kids. Cassian Wells floated through the data streams, a cocktail of ones and zeros shaking somewhere between his metaphorical ears. He had recently joined the illustrious ranks of digital consciousness, a fancy way of saying he was dead but mostly alive in servers. Breathe, he reminded himself, though technically, that was no longer necessary. The engineers of New Haven had many talents. Worrying wasn't one of them. Cassian, you there? The voice of Harper crackled in his mind like static on an old radio left out in a cosmic storm. Harper was all business, the kind that thrived on caffeine and sarcasm. Unfortunately, present and accounted for, Cassian replied, his voice smooth as a particularly well-greased cog. What's the crisis today? Did the bread makers unionize? Worse, Harper said. Zelari, Cassian groaned, his digital form flickering in simulated exasperation. What do they want now? Our undying loyalty or just the last biscuit in the tin subjugation? Harper replied with the kind of enthusiasm you might reserve for a tax audit. They've made demands, typical alien overlord stuff. Bow and scrape, yada yada, the old submit or die speech. Classic. Cassian rolled his digital eyes. You think they'd come up with something more original? Harper's face appeared in the series of data mirrors, a woman with the kind of expression that could sigh or milk in an instant. You're the genius engineer. Any ideas? Cassian considered his options. We could always offer them a subscription to our newsletter. Nobody reads those, or put you up as a digital ambassador, Harper shot back. You've got the charm of a malfunctioning toaster, flattered, Cassian replied, resisting the urge to simulate a bow. His mind ticked over the problem like a well-oiled machine. The Zelari weren't known for their patience or their wit. Their ships bristled with weapons, and their diplomats smiled like sharks. Let's see if we can't slow them down with bureaucracy. Works on humans might work on them. Harper snorted, a sound like static caught in a feedback loop. Bet we could drown them in paperwork. Or just drown them, Cassian mused, sifting through files of schematics and weaponry. Either way, let's keep our options open. The Dyson Sphere City was a marvel, an engineering feat that had once inspired awe and envy throughout the galaxy. Now it was just another target on the Zelari's galactic shopping list. New Haven's defense grid hummed with latent power, though Cassian knew it was more for show than anything, like a locked door with a particularly large keyhole. Have they made contact yet? Cassian asked, his mind whirring through the latest surveillance reports. Not officially, Harper replied, her fingers dancing over her console. But they are close. Close enough to smell our fear, smells like desperation and burnt toast, Cassian quipped, checking the time. We've got, what, a few hours, give or take, Harper said. Mostly take, Cassian sighed, the sound more digital than human. Let's convene the team, might as well face the music together. Or die trying. The conference room was a virtual construct, all clean lines and simulated wood. It was the kind of place where ideas went to die or get recycled into something slightly more useful. Cassian's team was already there. Me, the cybernetics whiz with a penchant for sarcasm. Jules, the weapons specialist who never met a problem he couldn't solve with explosives. And Kiara, the strategist who could make a chess game seem like a blood sport. Welcome, team, Cassian said, taking the digital head of the table. Hope you're all ready for another fun-packed day of not being annihilated. Me grinned, a mischievous glint in her eye. Anything beats accounting, speak for yourself, Jules grumbled. I was looking forward to testing my new plasma grenades. Save it for the Zelari, Cassian replied, waving a hand. They're our new party guests. Kiara leaned forward, her gaze sharp as a laser cutter. What's the plan, Cassian? Well, I thought we'd start with a nice cup of tea and a chat, Cassian said, flashing a grin. Then we'll roll up our sleeves and get to the real work. not dying, Kiara smirked. Tea's a bit optimistic. Never underestimate the power of a good brew, Cashin said before turning serious. All right, here's the deal. The Zelari want us to surrender. We prefer not to. Amen to that, Mi said, cracking her knuckles in anticipation. We've got some time before they breach our defenses, so let's make it count. Suggestions, Jules leaned back, arms crossed. Blow him up, Cashin nodded. A solid plan, Jules. But let's keep that as plan B. Mi adjusted her glasses, though they were as virtual as Cashin's patience. How about we hack their systems? A little virus to gum up the works. Now you're talking my language, Cashin said, feeling the spark of possibility. Harper, think you can whip something up? Already on it, Harper replied from her console. Nothing says we're not interested like a nasty bit of malware. Great. Kiara, Cashin prompted. She tilted her head, considering the angles. We need to make them think twice. Show them we're not an easy mark. Easier said than done, Jules muttered. True, Kiara admitted. But if we hit them hard enough, they might decide it's not worth the trouble. Cashin nodded, feeling the surge of determination. Right. Let's make sure they regret picking on the wrong Dyson sphere. The team dispersed, each member diving into their respective tasks. Cashin watched them go, feeling a peculiar mix of pride and apprehension. They were a motley crew, but they were his. And together, they might just pull off the impossible. As the hours ticked by, Cashin monitored the progress. Harper's virus was a work of art, a digital nightmare that would send the Zelari's systems into a tailspin. Jules tinkered with explosives, the faint smell of burnt circuits wafting through the virtual air. Kiara refined their strategy, her mind a constant whirl of tactics and countermeasures. Cashin, Harper's voice pulled him from his thoughts. Incoming transmission. Cashin straightened, preparing for the worst. Patch it through. A hologram flickered to life, revealing a Zelari officer. The alien was all spikes and sneers, its eyes cold and calculating. Humans of New Haven, the Zelari began, its voice as smooth as a rusty blade. You face annihilation unless you submit to our rule. Cashin resisted the urge to roll his eyes. Nice to meet you too. I assume you brought pie. The Zelari's expression didn't change. We offer you a place in our empire. Refuse and you will suffer. Thanks for the offer, Cashin said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. But we're not in the market for subjugation right now. Try back next century. The Zelari's eyes narrowed. You jest, human, but your time is running out. Funny, I was about to say the same to you. Cashin nodded to Harper, who unleashed the virus. The hologram flickered, the Zelari's image distorting as the malware took hold. Cashin watched with grim satisfaction as the alien's sneer twisted into confusion and rage. Let's see how they like a taste of human ingenuity, Cashin said, watching as the Zelari transmission cut off abruptly. Think they'll come back for more? Mi asked, a hint of challenge in her voice. Cashin shrugged, a ghost of a smile tugging at his lips. Oh, I hope so. They've still got a lot to learn about us. The atmosphere in the virtual room lightened, the team exchanging looks of shared defiance. They were still under threat, but for the first time in a long while, it felt like they had a fighting chance. All right, folks, Cashin said, clapping his hands together. Let's keep this momentum going. We've got a sphere to protect and some Zelari to disappoint. As the team got back to work, Cashin felt a renewed sense of purpose. The Zelari had come with demands of subjugation, but they'd find humanity wasn't so easily cowed. Not as long as Cashin Wells and his team had anything to say about it, and the Zelari were about to find out just how loud humans could speak. Cashin watched the hologram of the Zelari officer flicker out, leaving a satisfying silence in its wake. It was the calm before the storm, though if he were being honest, the storm was already brewing. He glanced at the digital clock ticking away in the corner of his virtual vision. A few more hours until their window of opportunity slammed shut, and these weren't the kind of windows you could just open again with a crowbar and a prayer. All right, team, Cashin called out, rallying the troops for what felt like the 1000th time. Let's keep this train wreck on the tracks. Mi snorted. More like a train wreck meeting a dumpster fire. Can't wait to see what catches first. Jules was busy brandishing a grenade with the kind of affection most reserved for small dogs or large paychecks. We should be so lucky. Cashin nodded. We've got some serious work ahead. Harper, how's that virus coming along? Harper, perpetually caffeinated and never caffeinated enough, tapped away at her console like it was the only thing standing between her and a nervous breakdown. Uploaded and ready to go. Think of it as the digital equivalent of a bad rash, me chuckled. You always did have a way with words. Cashin grinned despite himself. Remind me to write that in your performance review. Before anyone could muster another quip, the room dimmed, lights flickering like a nervous tick. Cashin felt the shift, the virtual construct around them shuddering as if it had caught a chill. Harper was the first to break the silence. Anyone else seeing this? Seeing, feeling, regretting, Jules replied. Cashin checked the systems. Looks like the Zelari are trying to demonstrate their charm. They've taken a dislike to our life support systems. Charming indeed, Kiara said, her eyes like daggers. What's their plan? Bore us to death with power outages, probably, Cashin said. But they've also disabled key city systems. New Haven's scrambling like eggs on a hot sidewalk, me frowned. What about our defenses? They are still up, but don't ask me how long we can keep it that way, Cashin replied, running simulations through his mind like a gambler counting cards. We need to hit them back, Jules said, his fingers itching for a trigger. And hard, agreed, Cashin said. But we need a plan that doesn't end with us floating in space like cosmic debris. Always the optimistic one, Harper remarked. Someone's got to counterbalance all your doom and gloom, Cashin shot back. Me cleared her throat. If they've messed with our systems, they've probably left a trail. I can try to trace it back. Do it, Cashin said. If we can find out where they're targeting us from, that might give us a leg up. Assuming they haven't booby-trapped their own systems, Kiara said. Assuming I like surprises, Cashin replied. Spoiler, I don't. Me got to work, fingers dancing over virtual keyboards as she delved into the digital networks. Cashin knew she'd find something. If me couldn't, no one could. She was the kind of person who could find a needle in a data haystack blindfolded. So what do we do in the meantime? Harper asked, glancing around. Cashin shrugged. We keep the lights on and don't panic. The second they sense weakness, they'll pounce. Like a shark at a swimming competition, me muttered, focused on her task. Exactly. Let's see if we can't bait them into second-guessing their master plan. Cashin tried to sound confident, though he wasn't convinced anyone was buying it. The lights flickered again, the room catching its breath between spasms of power. Cashin could almost hear the Zelari laughing, the alien equivalent of a smirk lingering on the edge of perception. He wondered if tentacles could curl into a grin of malicious glee. It wouldn't surprise him. We should get Lyra and Marek in on this, Kiara suggested, breaking the silence. We're going to need their expertise, Cashin nodded. Contact them. The more brains we have throwing ideas at the wall, the better. Lyra and Marek were New Haven's last line of defense, strategist and hacker, respectively. If anyone could help them outwit the Zelari, it was those two. They were the peanut butter and jelly of problem-solving. If peanut butter had a penchant for battle tactics, and jelly was a whiz at breaking and entering. On it, Harper said, reaching out to the duo. Let's hope they are in a good mood, Cashin chuckled. With this crew. What's not to love? Minutes later, Lyra and Marek appeared in the data mirrors, their expressions as comforting as a tax audit. Cashin, Lyra said, her voice crisp as a winter morning. I hear you've got a little Zelari problem. Understatement of the year, Cashin replied. We need some fresh ideas before they turn New Haven into a smoldering souvenir. Marek, always the quiet one, nodded. I assume you've already tried reasoning with them. Cashin resisted the urge to roll his digital eyes. And what gave it away? The part where they knocked out half our systems, or the friendly neighborhood death threat. They are testing us, Lyra said, her gaze sharpening with thought. They want to see how desperate we are. More desperate than a fish out of water, less desperate than a cat in a bathtub, Jules said. Lovely imagery, Harper deadpanned. Cashin leaned forward. We need to show them our bite's worse than our bark. Can't bite without teeth, Kiara pointed out. Then let's sharpen some fangs, Cashin said. What do we need to do? Mi looked up from her work. I'm tracing their digital breadcrumbs. If I can find their command center, we might be able to hit them where it hurts. Marek nodded. And meanwhile, I can work on infiltrating their systems. A little sabotage can go a long way, Cashin grinned. I like the sound of that. How do we make it happen first? I'll need access to the mainframe, Marek said. It's like trying to break into a bank vault with a spoon, but I've done more with less. Let's see if we can't make it a spork, Harper said, already setting up the necessary protocols. Meanwhile, Lyra interjected, we need a distraction. Jules perked up. Did someone say distraction? Yes, Jules. And you're just the man for the job, Cashin said. Jules grinned, his eyes lighting up like a kid in a candy store. Count me in. While Jules schemed his next big bang, Cashin coordinated with Lyra and Marek. Time was slipping through their fingers like sand, but they still had a fighting chance. All right, folks, Cashin said, his voice steady. Let's remind the Zelari why messing with humans is never a good idea. The team dispersed, each member diving into their tasks with renewed vigor. Cashin monitored their progress, the virtual world around him alive with activity and purpose. It was a delicate dance, balancing desperation with determination, but they were all in it together. As the minutes dragged on, Mi's efforts bore fruit. Got it, she announced, triumph in her voice. I found their control node. Cashin felt a surge of hope, where Mi projected a map highlighting the coordinates in the vastness of space. There, smack dab in the middle of their fleet. It's like they wanted to make this easy for us, Jules laughed. Easy as pie. With extra lasers, we can use this, Lyra said, studying the map. If we hit their node and Marek's in their system, we might just convince them to back off. Marek nodded, already working his magic. I'll start the hack. Just keep them distracted long enough for me to slip through the cracks. Cashin nodded. Jules, that's your cue. On it, Jules said, his excitement palpable. Cashin watched as the team pulled together, each piece falling into place like a well-oiled machine. It was a long shot, but long shots were what they did best. Cashin, Harper said, glancing up from her console. Incoming transmission from the Zelari. Patch it through, Cashin replied, steeling himself for another round of alien banter. The hologram flickered to life once more, the Zelari officer looking less smug and more annoyed. Cashin couldn't blame it. Realizing humanity was more stubborn than expected was a tough pill to swallow. Humans, the Zelari began, its voice a grating reminder of their predicament. You persist in this folly. Surrender now and we may yet be merciful. Cashin couldn't help but laugh. Mercy from a Zelari, that's rich. The alien's eyes narrowed. You mock us. Guilty as charged, Cashin said, but you're not giving us much to work with. Maybe if your demands were less extinction and more let's talk this out over coffee. Your resistance is futile. Yeah, we've heard that one before, Cashin replied, exchanging a knowing look with Harper. But we're a stubborn lot. The Zelari hesitated as if trying to process the human penchant for sarcasm. Cashin didn't give it the chance to catch up. Marek, Cashin said, keeping his voice low. How's it looking? Almost there, Marek replied, fingers flying over his virtual interface. Jules was already in position, ready to unleash his special brand of chaos. Just say the word, Cashin nodded, feeling the tension tighten around him like a noose. This was it, their best and maybe only chance to turn the tide. Now, Cashin commanded. Jules sprang into action, setting off a series of controlled explosions with the precision of a maestro orchestrating a symphony of destruction. The Zelari's fleet lit up like a fireworks show, a distraction as visceral as it was effective. In the chaos, Marek made his move, slipping into the Zelari's systems with the grace of a thief in the night. Cashin watched, heart in his throat, as his team executed their plan with deadly efficiency. Got it, Marek announced, triumph in his voice. I'm in, Cashin grinned, feeling a wave of relief wash over him. Good work, team. Now let's make them regret ever hearing the name New Haven. As Marek worked his magic, Cashin knew the real battle was about to begin. The Zelari had come to conquer, but they'd find humanity was anything but an easy target. And with any luck, the Zelari would learn a valuable lesson. Never underestimate a human with nothing to lose and everything to fight for. Cashin watched the chaos unfold with a grim satisfaction that bordered on sociopathic. Jules' fireworks did their job, painting the Zelari fleet with enough explosions to make a pyrotechnics convention look like a kid's sparkler display. But once the dust settled, Cashin knew it was only a matter of time before the real counterattack began. Me, meanwhile, was as busy as a one-armed juggler at a chainsaw tossing contest, her fingers a blur across the virtual keyboards. If I'm reading this right, and let's hope I am, our tentacled friends have a secret little plan tucked away in their tentacle sleeves. Do tell, Harper said, sipping on what must have been her 7th cup of coffee. The only thing keeping her awake more than caffeine was the bone-chilling fear of obliteration. Zelari are trying to control the human population by tapping into the Dyson sphere's core, Mi said, barely hiding her surprise. They're hoping to turn everyone into obedient puppets. Mind control, Kiara snorted. Great. Like the last thing humanity needs is to be more like sheep, Cashin groaned. That's just what we need. More tin-foil hat conspiracies coming true. Lyra, who had been silently contemplating the absurdity of their predicament, finally chimed in. The Zelari underestimate human ingenuity. They're likely assuming their tech is beyond our comprehension. Can't blame them, Jules said, still high off the adrenaline. Most days I can't even comprehend my own toaster. Lyra's got a point, Cashin said. We could use their arrogance against them. While Marek continued his digital tango with the Zelari systems, Lyra sketched out a strategy on the luminous virtual map hanging mid-air. They're focusing all their efforts on brute force and technology, but they have no idea how far we're willing to go to sabotage them. We need to think like a human, not like a machine. Harper's eyes lit up. We could overload the core with a feedback loop, turn their mind control operation into a self-destruct sequence. That's a hell of a gamble, Cashin said. But then, what's life without a few high-stakes bets? Boring, me interjected, cracking a rare smile. And frankly, I prefer my life with a bit of excitement. All right, Cashin said, clapping his digital hands together. Harper, set up the loop. Me, keep an eye on their systems for any signs of retaliation. Jules, I need you ready with every explosive toy you can muster. Jules saluted with a grin that was as comforting as a rattlesnake in a sleeping bag. Consider it done. Kiara, Cashin said, turning to her. I need you to make sure our systems stay online long enough for this all to matter. Kiara nodded, expression sharp. Like holding a house of cards in a windstorm. Nothing we haven't done before. As the team dove into their respective tasks, Cashin couldn't help but marvel at the human spirit, or maybe it was just human stubbornness. Either way, they weren't about to roll over and let the Zelari steamroll them. Cashin's mind buzzed with activity, watching as Harper worked her magic, creating a feedback loop that would turn the Zelari's plan on its head. This is either going to be brilliant or disastrous, Harper muttered, her fingers dancing across the console. Probably both, Cashin replied, humor tinged with a hefty dose of reality. As if on cue, the digital clock in Cashin's virtual vision ticked ominously, a constant reminder that their window of opportunity was shrinking faster than the patience of a babysitter watching sugar-hyped toddlers. The Zelari officer reappeared, looking more like a disgruntled squid than ever. Human persistence is unexpected, Cashin smirked, unable to resist the opportunity to needle their foe. You say persistence, we say being a monumental pain in the ass. Your defiance is futile, the Zelari insisted, a phrase that seemed to be its go-to favorite, right up there with hello and engage aggressive negotiations. Yeah, we covered that already, Cashin drawled. But you know what they say, never tell a human the odds. The Zelari's expression, or what passed for one, didn't change. Perhaps it had come to terms with the fact that humans were an infuriatingly unpredictable species. "Me, any updates?" Cashin asked, refocusing on the task at hand. They didn't have the time for a protracted multi-species debate club session. "I'm seeing increased activity on their end. They're trying to recalibrate, but Harper's loop is running interference." "Good," Cashin said, resisting the urge to pump his fist in digital triumph. "Jules, get ready to introduce them to the wonders of human fireworks." "With pleasure," Jules replied, already primed and eager to sow chaos. The room buzzed with adrenaline, the kind of electric atmosphere usually reserved for high-stakes poker games and bomb defusal scenarios. Cashin felt his digital nerves twitching with anticipation. "Lyra, any last words of wisdom?" Cashin asked, wanting to cover all bases before the proverbial show kicked off. "Just remember, Zelari might think they have us outgunned, but they're fighting a species known for doing more with less," Lyra said, her voice steady as always. "Doing more with less," Cashin echoed. "Our unofficial motto." Harper finished her setup, giving a quick nod. "We're ready. We can trigger the loop whenever you give the word." Cashin took a moment to appreciate the gravity of their situation. Not every day you found yourself on the brink of thwarting an alien conquest with a hodgepodge of feral ingenuity and sheer bloody-mindedness. "All right, team," Cashin said, voice ringing with the kind of determination that made pep talks seem like motivational posters in comparison. "Let's give the Zelari a lesson in human adaptability they won't soon forget." With a final, unified effort, the team initiated their plan, launching their offensive with the kind of reckless abandon that only came from having no better options. The feedback loop Harper had designed began its work, twisting the Zelari's own technology against them. Me kept a hawk's eye on their systems, ready to alert the team to any changes. Jules, meanwhile, prepared to unleash his particular brand of chaos. Cashin watched it all unfold, his digital consciousness straddling a fine line between hope and dread. The plan was risky, no doubt about that, but it was also their best shot at turning the tide. Feedback loops holding steady, Harper reported, her eyes glued to the console. "They're scrambling to counteract it, but it's buying us time. Not for long, though," Me warned. "They're rerouting their resources to break through. They're not as clueless as we'd like. Never thought I'd miss the good old days when aliens were just urban legends," Kiara muttered, keeping a close eye on their systems. "Yeah, those were the days," Cashin agreed. "When all we had to worry about were tax audits and missing socks." Minutes passed, each one feeling like an eternity. The team held their collective breath, waiting for any sign that their gamble was paying off. "Jules now," Cashin barked, as the Zelari began to regain some semblance of control. Jules grinned, launching his barrage of distractions with the enthusiasm of a kid with a brand new toy. Explosions erupted in strategic locations, forcing the Zelari to redirect their attention and temporarily relieving the pressure on Harper's loop. "Nice fireworks," Me commented, her fingers never pausing in their dance. "Brings a tear to the eye, doesn't it?" Jules replied, sounding for all the world like an artist admiring his masterpiece. "Harper, how are we looking?" Cashin asked, keeping a close watch on the unfolding chaos. "They're still struggling, but it's a matter of time before they adapt," Harper said, sweat beading on her forehead despite the chilled air of the console room. And then, as if fate decided to give them a break, Merrick's voice crackled through the link. "Got something. I found a vulnerability in their command protocols. Merrick, you beautiful bastard." Cashin crowed, genuine excitement threading through his voice. "Can you exploit it?" "Already on it," Merrick replied, his tone as calm as ever. "It won't take them down, but it'll give them a digital headache the size of a small moon. Should slow them down. Every little bit helps," Lyra said, her eyes fixed on the overlay of the battle. Cashin watched as Merrick launched his digital offensive, the Zelari systems flickering and stuttering in response. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was more than they'd had 5 minutes ago. As the battle raged on, Cashin took a moment to reflect on the sheer insanity of their situation. Here they were, a mismatched group of humans, holding the line against an alien race that had presumed to treat them like mere insects. "Any new ideas on the menu?" Mi asked, scanning her readouts for any additional opportunities. Cashin considered their options, the proverbial wheels in his mind spinning with possibilities. They were still alive, still fighting, and for now that was enough. "Let's keep the pressure on," Cashin decided. "As long as we keep them off balance, we've got a chance." With that, the team dove back into the fray, determined to remind the Zelari that humanity wasn't going down without a fight. They might be outgunned and outmatched, but by God, they weren't out of tricks just yet. As the chaos continued to unfold, Cashin felt a strange sense of camaraderie with his crew, a ragtag band of misfits and renegades, united in their determination to face down an enemy that thought them lesser. "Here's to the underdogs," Cashin murmured, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "May we never stop biting off more than we can chew." And so, under the flickering glow of virtual displays, and with the specter of annihilation looming large, the battle for New Haven raged on. Cashin flickered in and out like a bad TV signal, his digital form twisted with a mix of frustration and sardonic amusement as he watched the Zelari adapt to their tactics. "Didn't think they had it in them," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Harper was elbow-deep in console wiring, her fingers working with the speed and precision of someone who drank too much coffee and had too little time. "These squid brains are quicker learners than I gave him credit for," she grumbled, eyes darting between screens as if she could will them to display good news. "Credit where it's due," Cashin replied, a wry grin edging his virtual mouth. "They've got a knack for making our lives difficult." "Hardly a unique talent," Kiara chimed in, her tone dripping with sarcasm as she monitored their systems. "I think every government official back on Earth managed that just fine." Mi was tapping at her virtual keyboards, lines of code racing across her screens. "Their recalibration speed is impressive," she said, not without a hint of reluctant admiration. "Of course, they are aliens trying to subjugate us, so they lose cool points there." "Yeah, alien overlords don't really scream cool to me," Jules added, prepping another batch of his so-called fireworks. "More like obnoxious and in sore need of a swift kick." "Noted," Cashin said, digitally crossing his arms and projecting an air of exaggerated confidence. "Marek, you mentioned a flaw in their network." Marek's voice crackled through the speakers, carrying the gravitas of a man who had just discovered the enemy's Achilles heel, or at least its slightly overworked toe. "I did. There's a minor flaw in their communication protocols. If we can exploit it, we might just give them a little oopsie moment." "Minor flaw, major mess," Lyra observed, leaning back in her chair with the kind of relaxed posture that suggested she'd seen too much to be rattled by this. "I like it," Cashin chuckled, a sound like static and amusement mingling. "Well, we can't exactly gift them a fruit basket, so a digital migraine will have to do." "Marek, how soon can you hit them where it hurts?" Harper asked, wiping sweat from her brow with the back of her hand, a smear of grease adding to the war paint effect. "Give me a minute," Marek replied. Which in tech terms means anywhere between 60 seconds and several eternities. "Damn clock's ticking like a bomb," Jules muttered, eyeing his explosives with more affection than was healthy. "Always has been," Cashin said. "But Marek, if you can pull this off, I'll personally buy you the finest bottle of synthetic whiskey credits can buy." "Alcohol can't fix everything," Mi noted, somewhat dryly. "No," Cashin agreed. "But it does make the end of the world a little more bearable, doesn't it?" As Marek worked his magic, the universe seemed to hold its breath. The team was silent, each of them hyper-focused on their screens, fingers poised to react to whatever chaos Marek was about to unleash. The seconds stretched, the tension in the room tangible enough to cut with a poorly maintained laser scalpel. It was the kind of suspense that pulled at your nerves like a particularly persistent dentist. And then something shifted. Merrick's voice came through, calm but with a thread of satisfaction. Done. Their network's got a hiccup the size of a black hole. Beautiful, Harper breathed, her eyes lighting up with a fire that was equal parts hope and rebellion. Not that I doubt your genius, Merrick, Me said, but what exactly does that mean for us? Cashin interjected, a gleeful tone infusing his digital voice. It means things are about to get interesting. Hold on to your seats. The Zelari systems blinked and stuttered, their once seamless operations now peppered with glitches and hiccups. It was as if someone had poured sand into the gears of a well-oiled machine. Look at them squirm, Jules said with a grin. Think they're getting uncomfortable yet? Probably just realize they're not the smartest squid in the galaxy, Kiara replied, watching the enemy struggle with a mixture of satisfaction and caution. Me, any change on our end? Cashin asked, ever the pragmatist. She flashed a quick thumbs up. We're holding steady. Their attempts to counteract the feedback loop are slowing down. Guess they didn't anticipate the human element, our knack for making their day worse, Harper said, reconfiguring her console for what felt like the 100th time today. One of our many charms, Cashin quipped. Along with sarcasm and bad decisions. As the Zelari scrambled to adapt to Merrick's interference, Cashin turned his attention to the next problem. Merrick, how long can we keep this up? Not long enough, Merrick admitted, his tone sobering. We've bought ourselves time, but they'll find a workaround eventually. We need to hit them again, and soon. And here I was hoping for a coffee break, Jules said, his voice a mock whine. Maybe after we save the world, Lyra suggested, her deadpan delivery earning a chuckle from Harper. All right, everyone, Cashin said, rallying his troops like a particularly sarcastic general. Let's not waste this opportunity. Me, see if you can pinpoint any other weak spots while they're distracted. On it, Me replied, already delving into the data with the kind of focus usually reserved for professional chess players and bomb disposal experts. And Jules, I hope you've got more than just pretty lights up your sleeve, Cashin said. Way ahead of you, Jules replied, his eyes gleaming with mischief. I've got a few surprises left, Cashin nodded, feeling the rush of adrenaline that came with being so close to either victory or ruin. Kiara, I need you to keep our systems from collapsing under their counterattacks. A house of cards won't do us much good if they blow it down with the hairdryer of doom. Kiara smirked, her fingers already flying across her keyboard. Consider it my morning exercise. Finally, Harper, Cashin said, his tone softening just a fraction. Keep that loop steady, it's our lifeline. Harper nodded, determination etched in every line of her face. You got it, boss. The team was united, their shared resolve a tangible force. They might be outmatched and outgunned, but they were still in the fight, and that counted for something. As the battle raged on, Cashin found himself marveling at their tenacity. Each setback was met with grim determination, each success with dry humor. They were human, and that meant they were stubborn as hell. We're down but not out, Me said, glancing up from her screens with a glimmer of hope in her eyes. Story of our lives, Cashin replied, unable to suppress a grin. The Zelari were on the back foot, their once assured victory slipping through their tentacles like water. It was a sight that would have been satisfying if it weren't so terrifying. Hold steady, folks, Cashin said, his voice steadying the turbulent seas of uncertainty. We're not done yet. Got another one, Me exclaimed suddenly, her excitement infectious. There's a secondary access node they've overlooked. We could use it to amplify the feedback. That's what I like to hear, Cashin said, nodding. Merrick, think you can make it happen? Wouldn't be here if I couldn't, Merrick replied, the barest hint of a chuckle in his voice. Let's give them another headache, Lyra suggested, her voice a cool balm in the heat of battle. With renewed vigor, the team plunged back into action, each of them playing their part in the grand tapestry of chaos they'd woven. The Zelari had underestimated their resolve, and now they were paying the price. Weapons hot, Jules announced, his fingers poised to unleash another round of explosive surprises. Do it, Cashin ordered, his voice carrying the weight of human defiance. With a nod, Jules triggered the next wave, the resulting explosions lighting up the virtual screens like a macabre fireworks display. "Hope they are enjoying the show," Harper said, her gaze never leaving the console. "Yeah, all that's missing is popcorn," Mee added, her tone light despite the tension. The Zelari systems were faltering, their attempts to regain control stymied by Marek's deft interference and Mee's strategic strikes. It was a dynamic dance of chaos and order, and for once, the humans seemed to be leading. "Just a little longer," Cashin urged, his digital form appearing more solid with each step forward. "Long enough for us to pull a rabbit out of our hats?" Kiara asked, her voice a wry counterpoint to the tension. "Or maybe an entire zoo," Lyra suggested, her dry humor an anchor amidst the uncertainty. The team's laughter was a balm, a moment of camaraderie amidst the storm. They were in this together and they wouldn't go down without a fight. "Keep it up," Cashin said, his voice firm and resolute. "We're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for every city, every life they think they can control." The stakes were high, the odds daunting, but Cashin knew one thing for certain. They wouldn't give up. Not now, not ever. "Let's show these tentacled tyrants what it means to cross humans," Cashin declared, his voice ringing with determination. And with that, they plunged into the fray once more, ready to turn the tide in their favor or die trying. The Dyson sphere's core shuddered like it had been hit by a cosmic battering ram, lights flickering with the enthusiasm of a dying firefly. Cashin's virtual eyes flicked over the scene, as if he could will the chaos into something more cooperative. Fat chance. The Zelari were tightening their grip, and it felt less like a stranglehold and more like being pressed beneath a particularly heavy boot. "Looks like our dance partners are stepping it up," Kiara noted, her voice dripping with sarcasm as she monitored the system readouts. "I was hoping for a waltz, not this breakneck tango." "Temper your expectations," Cashin replied, his digital form flickering in the corner of Kiara's vision. "With aliens, it's always a surprise party and we weren't invited." "Yeah, well, they're about to crash the whole damn venue," Harper muttered, fingers flying across the console as she rerouted power to the failing life support systems. "We're running on borrowed time, which we owe to the universe with interest," Marek quipped, his interface lighting up as he attempted to stabilize the network once more. "And it's collecting. Hope it doesn't come with late fees," Mee added, eyes glued to her screen, code flowing like a stream of consciousness. "We can't afford another hit." Cashin's virtual clock ticked down with a precision that was simultaneously comforting and ominous. Hope was a slim thread, easily snapped, but the team was hanging onto it with a grip that could crush diamonds. "Jules, how's the surprise package coming?" Cashin asked, turning his focus to the explosives expert, who was fiddling with a detonator like it was a particularly tricky puzzle. Jules grinned, a glint of mischief in his eyes. "Ready to deliver the fireworks show of a century. Let's see how these bastards like a little human ingenuity. Right? Because if there's one thing aliens love, it's surprise explosives," Lyra said dryly, crossing her arms as if she could ward off the impending doom through sheer willpower. "Better than surprise taxes," Mee observed, her fingers a blur on the virtual keyboards. "Or surprise in-laws," Harper added, offering a rare but fleeting smile. "All right, folks," Cashin said, rallying his digital troops. "We need to keep them off balance long enough to shove this nasty little virus down their gullets. Mee, you got any more tricks up your sleeve?" "Only the ones that haven't exploded in my face yet," Mee replied, her tone light despite the dire situation. "I'm working on a backdoor that'll make them regret ever coming here." "Good," Cashin said. "Regret is one of humanity's best exports." As the Zelari systems lurched and stuttered, the team threw everything they had into their efforts. It was like bailing out a sinking ship with a thimble, but sometimes all you had was a thimble and a healthy dose of desperation. "Systems are stabilizing." "Barely," Kiara reported, tapping away with a focus that could melt steel. "But if they hit us again, we're toast, and not the buttery kind." "If I survive this, I swear I'm quitting this job," Harper muttered, sweat beading on her brow. I'll open a bakery or a bar, anything but this. Both, Lyra suggested. Cake with a side of whiskey. The world could use more of that. I'll drink to that, Jules chimed in, eyes still on the explosives like a proud parent. Cashin tried to focus, but the reality was inescapable. They were on a knife's edge. Humanity had a nasty habit of clinging on when everyone else thought they should have let go. He could only hope that stubbornness would see them through. Marek, any luck holding them back? Cashin asked, his virtual form pacing, a habit from his days with a physical body. Marek let out a humorless chuckle. Luck, that's a myth, my friend, but the network's holding for now like a wet paper bag, just not sure for how long. Let's hope it's until our next brilliant idea, Mi quipped, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. The Zelari were regrouping, their tactics shifting like a particularly vicious chess game, one where the pieces occasionally bit back. And yet, amidst the struggle, the team was holding. Barely, but that was enough for now. Incoming transmission, Kiara announced, her voice cutting through the tension like a laser scalpel. From the Zelari. Probably a gloating session. Cashin's virtual form solidified slightly, focusing on the incoming data. Patch it through. Let's hear what the overlords have to say. The holographic display crackled to life, revealing a Zelari officer with an expression that was inscrutable, probably because their face looked like a squid's had mated with a particularly grumpy octopus. Humans, the Zelari said, its voice carrying a faint trace of disdain. Your resistance is noted but ultimately futile. Well, that's original, Cashin replied, his tone dripping with mockery. Cut to the chase, Calamari. What do you want? The Zelari's eyes narrowed, or at least Cashin thought they did. Hard to tell when they didn't have eyelids. Your surrender. We are inevitable, Cashin chuckled, a sound like broken glass in the wind. Funny how those who call themselves inevitable always show up after we've wrecked their plans. We are adaptable, the Zelari continued undeterred. Your attempts to disrupt our control will fail. Love how they think we're trying to disrupt them, Jules whispered, loading another explosive. When in reality we're just trying to not die. Cashin ignored the Zelari for a moment, addressing his team. What's our status? Stable-ish, Harper said, her fingers still dancing over the console. But it's a house of cards in a hurricane. Cashin nodded, turning back to the Zelari hologram. Well, in that case, we politely decline your surrender offer. Thanks, but no thanks. You will regret this, the Zelari said, its voice shifting from disdain to something approaching anger. Not the first time I've heard that today, Cashin replied, cutting the transmission with a casual swipe. All right, team, let's keep this circus running. The Zelari were pressing their advantage, their systems focusing on overwhelming the humans' defenses. Every second felt like an eternity, and the margin for error was non-existent. Harper, keep that loop steady, Cashin said, his digital voice carrying the weight of command. It's our lifeline. You got it, Harper replied, her focus unbroken. But I make no promises about the sanity of the operator. Mi's fingers flew across her keyboards, her mind a whirlwind of strategies and desperation. I've got the back door ready. If we can hit them again, we might just buy ourselves enough time to breathe. Breathing's good, Lyra said, her voice calm amidst the storm. I'm a fan. Cashin watched as the team fought to keep their heads above water, each of them driven by the sheer refusal to give up. It was inspiring in a sort of bleak, we're all gonna die anyway but what the hell kind of way. We're not dead yet, Jules said, as if reminding himself as much as anyone else. Speak for yourself, Cashin replied, a ghost of humor in his voice. I'm just a digital echo after all. We're not done yet either, Marek added, his tone resolute. Let's give them hell. The Zelari were relentless, but so were they. And as long as they had breath, or in Cashin's case data, there was hope. Slim, fragile hope, but hope nonetheless. Harper's console beeped urgently, a counterattack from the Zelari sending shivers through their systems. They're not giving us a break, are they? Would you? Mi asked, deflecting lines of code like a digital fencer. They want us out of the way for good. But we're not out yet, Lyra said, her voice a cool breeze in a sweltering desert. And we won't be. right? Cashin said, rallying them once more. We hold the line here, no more running. The Dyson sphere trembled again, the lights flickering ominously. The Zelari were closing in, their grip tightening like a noose. Jules, is that package ready? Cashin asked, his virtual form pacing, restless as a caged beast. Locked and loaded, Jules replied, his grin wolfish. Just waiting for the go. Wait for my mark, Cashin instructed, his mind racing for solutions. Time was slipping through their fingers like sand, and each attempt to hold it back felt like trying to plug a dam with chewing gum. The Zelari's relentless advance was a reminder that they were not invincible, just stubborn enough to keep trying. Me, any progress on that back door? Cashin asked, his tone a mix of urgency and hope. Just about ready, Me replied, her focus unwavering. It'll hit them where it hurts. Good, Cashin said, nodding. We'll need every edge we can get. The Zelari's assault was a storm of data and disruption, their tactics a reminder of their superiority. But Cashin and his team had the element of surprise, or at least the element of human stubbornness, which was nearly as effective. We've got this, Harper said, her voice firm despite the fear lurking beneath her words. We just have to hold on a little longer. Cashin's virtual form hovered, an anchor in the storm. We're not alone in this. Remember that. The team fought on, each of them driven by the unyielding human spirit that refused to bow. Cashin could feel it, an echo of what he'd once had, a body, a heartbeat, a life. It was a reminder of why they were fighting, of what was at stake. Their systems are slipping, Merrick reported, his voice carrying a note of triumph. We're breaking through. Perfect, Cashin said, a spark of hope flaring to life. Let's keep pushing. The Zelari might have had the advantage, but the humans had something more, a refusal to back down, a determination that burned bright even in the darkest hour. On my mark, Jules, Cashin ordered, the tension in the air thick enough to taste. Jules' fingers hovered over the detonator. Ready when you are. Cashin took a moment, a breath in a world where he no longer needed to breathe. Now, the team moved as one, a seamless unit of defiance and ingenuity. They hit the Zelari with everything they had, a final surge of resistance in a battle that seemed all but lost. And as the explosions rocked the Dyson sphere, Cashin knew one thing for certain. They weren't out yet, not by a long shot. Cashin Wells watched the chaos unfold around him, or rather, through him, given his current state as a digital consciousness. It was one of those epiphanies you read about in bad novels, but this one felt genuine, like a light bulb flickering on in a decrepit basement. Human emotions and creativity, that's where they held the upper hand. The Zelari, with all their advanced tech and smug superiority, couldn't predict the unpredictability of the human condition. All right, everyone, listen up, Cashin announced, his virtual voice echoing through the digital ether and into the team's earpieces. I've got an idea that's either going to save our asses or get us killed. But since we're already halfway to dead, I figure what the hell, is this the part where you tell us we're going to use love and friendship to defeat the bad guys? Me snorted, her fingers a blur across her virtual keyboards. Because I'm fresh out of Cumbea. Not quite, Cashin replied with a grin that only he could see. But close. We're going to give them a lesson in human chaos. Jules cocked an eyebrow, still fiddling with his beloved explosives. I like chaos, but you'll have to be more specific. Controlled chaos or the kind that gets us court-martialed posthumously. The latter, Cashin said, a hint of mischief in his tone. We're going to mess with their heads by doing the one thing they won't expect, using the Dyson sphere's core systems against them in a way so illogical they won't see it coming. Harper chimed in, her voice a mix of curiosity and skepticism. And how exactly do we plan to pull that off without blowing ourselves to kingdom come? Simple, Cashin said, as if the answer was obvious. We've got to tap into the core's emotional resonance. Human emotions might be our best weapon. Kiara let out a bark of laughter. You want us to weaponize feelings? That's either genius or the worst idea since pineapple on pizza. "Hey, pineapple has its place," Lyra interjected, her voice smooth as always. "But I'm with Kiara on this one." "How do we even begin to tap into that? Leave the how to me," Mi said, her voice steely with determination. "If Cashin can route the data flow, I can twist it into whatever emotional cocktail we need." "Sounds like a plan," Marek said, his voice steady if not entirely convinced. "But we better work fast." "The Zelari aren't exactly the patient type." Cashin nodded, or at least he imagined he did. "We need to overload their systems with something they can't process. Fear, love, rage, whatever it takes to throw them off balance." Jules rolled his eyes, though the grin tugging at his lips betrayed his amusement. "So, we're making them feel. Never thought I'd see the day when a digital ghost would be giving a lecture on empathy." "Desperate times," Jules, Cashin shot back. "And besides, nothing like a little emotional warfare to spice up the end times." "All right," Harper said, her fingers dancing over the console. "Let's reroute the core systems and see if we can make these squidheads cry." The team set to work, their movements a flurry of coordinated chaos. If the Zelari had one weakness, it was their inability to predict the insane risks humans were willing to take for survival. They'd never anticipate a strategy that hinged on emotional manipulation. The Dyson sphere's core, a labyrinthine structure of interwoven energies and shimmering panels, pulsed around them like a giant, mechanical heart. It was both awe-inspiring and terrifying, and if they were going to pull this off, it would take every ounce of cunning and insanity they could muster. Mi's fingers flew over her virtual keyboard, her mind a whirlwind of calculations and code. "I've got a few emotions queued up. What are we thinking first? Good old-fashioned terror or something more subtle?" Cashin considered it for a moment, his digital form flickering as he processed options. "Let's start with fear. Hit them hard and fast." If there's one thing we know about the Zelari, it's that they've never truly experienced fear. Let's introduce them to the concept. "Fear it is," Mi confirmed, her tone as sharp as her focus. "Let's hope they don't embrace it like humans do horror movies." "They won't," Cashin said, a hint of malice in his voice. "They don't have the stomach for it." With a few deft keystrokes, Mi released the emotional payload into the Dyson sphere's core. It spread like a virus, carried through the systems to infiltrate the Zelari's communication protocols. The flaw they'd discovered was a minor one, but it was enough to let the chaos seep in. The team watched as the Zelari's advance faltered, their systems reacting erratically. The once-organized assault began to crumble, their tight formations breaking apart as the fear took hold. Kiara let out a low whistle, her eyes glued to the readouts. "Would you look at that? They're more scattered than my ex's excuses." "I'd say I'm surprised it's working," Lyra said, her voice tinged with disbelief. "But frankly, I think I'm too relieved." "Now comes the fun part," Cashin announced, the grin evident in his tone. "Let's see how they handle a little human rage." "Jules, you've been awfully quiet. Got any fireworks left?" Jules chuckled, a dark sound that matched the mood. "Oh, I've got plenty. Just say the word." Cashin hesitated for a moment, feeling the weight of their decision. "Do it. Let's make sure they never forget who they're dealing with." Jules didn't need to be told twice. He set off the explosives, a symphony of destruction that streaked across the Zelari's fleet like a wave of fiery indignation. The explosions were brilliant, devastating, and thoroughly satisfying. The Zelari's response was immediate, their panicked attempts to retaliate hindered by the emotional overload coursing through their systems. It was chaos, pure and simple, and it was beautiful. "Looks like they're having a bad day," Harper said, her voice tinged with grim satisfaction. "Bad day? More like a bad millennium," Marek added, his tone barely concealing his amusement. Cashin allowed himself a moment of satisfaction, watching as the Zelari floundered. It was working, their strategy was actually working. The Zelari couldn't comprehend the madness they'd unleashed, and it was their downfall. "Mi, get ready to deliver the final blow," Cashin instructed, his virtual form steady amidst the storm. "Let's hit them with love." Something so bewildering they'll never know what hit them. Love, huh? Me said, her voice laced with irony. Let's hope they are the sentimental type. She input the command, and the Dyson sphere's core systems redirected the emotional energy once more. The sensation spread through the Zelari's networks, a wave of unexpected warmth and compassion that clashed violently with their logical, analytical minds. The result was instantaneous. The Zelari's systems, already teetering on the brink, collapsed under the strain. Their forces were thrown into disarray, the once unyielding ranks dissolving into chaos. Would you look at that? Kiara said, her voice triumphant. They're falling apart faster than a politician's promise. Cashin couldn't help but laugh, a sound that echoed through the digital space. I knew they wouldn't know what to do with a little love. The tide had turned. By leveraging the one thing the Zelari couldn't anticipate, the unpredictability of human emotions, the team had found a way to fight back. It was a revelation, and a reminder of the strength they possessed, even in their darkest hour. All right, team, Cashin said, his voice filled with a new sense of purpose. Let's press the advantage. They might be down, but they're not out yet. Harper, me, Jules, Lyra, Kiara, and Marek all nodded, their focus renewed. They'd found a chink in the Zelari's armor, and they intended to exploit it to the fullest. We've got them on the ropes, Harper said, her voice a mix of excitement and determination. Let's not waste the opportunity. Cashin watched as the team worked together, their movements synchronized and efficient. It was a testament to their resilience, a reminder that humanity's greatest strength was its ability to adapt, to find hope even when all seemed lost. The Zelari might have been superior in technology, but they'd underestimated the power of human creativity and emotion. It was a mistake they wouldn't live long enough to regret. Keep the pressure on, Cashin urged, his virtual eyes scanning the battlefield. We can't let up now. The team redoubled their efforts, pushing the Zelari further back with each passing moment. Their strategy had shifted. It was no longer about survival but about winning, about showing the Zelari that humanity would not be so easily conquered. Me, how's the back door holding? Cashin asked, his voice a mix of urgency and hope. Like a charm, Me replied, her fingers dancing across her keyboards. They're still struggling to patch the openings. We've got them on the defensive. Perfect, Cashin said, satisfaction evident in his tone. Then let's make sure they stay there. The Dyson sphere's core systems continued to pulse, the emotional energy surging through the networks like a living entity. It was a testament to the power of the human spirit, a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming odds, they could still find a way to fight back. The Zelari's forces were in disarray, their once cohesive formations shattered by the emotional onslaught. Their tactical advantage had crumbled, leaving them vulnerable to the team's relentless assault. We're doing it, Harper said, her voice filled with disbelief and elation. We're actually doing it. Don't count your chickens before they hatch, Lyra warned, her voice a steadying presence amidst the chaos. We've still got a long way to go, Cashin nodded, his virtual form flickering with determination. We're not out of the woods yet, but at least we've got a fighting chance. The team pressed on, their focus unwavering as they continued to exploit the Zelari's weakness. It was a gamble, a desperate bid for survival, but it was working. And for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Cashin allowed himself to hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, they'd find a way to survive this after all. Cashin hovered in the digital ether, a patchwork of code and consciousness, watching as his team scrambled to bring the Zelari to their metaphorical knees. It was like trying to juggle chainsaws while blindfolded, except the chainsaws were aliens, and the blindfold was the universe's worst hangover. As if alien invasions weren't already fun, Cashin mused, we've got to deal with them in the middle of a space opera. Lucky us. Harper's fingers were a blur over the console, her focus etched onto the screen with the intensity of someone defusing a particularly ornery bomb. Cashin, I need more bandwidth. These Zelari systems are tighter than a politician's handshake. Bandwidth. In this economy, Cashin's laugh reverberated through the digital space. But sure, I'll pull some strings. Just don't ask where they come from. Kiara snorted, her eyes glued to the holographic display showing the Dyson Sphere's core systems. Tell me we're not stealing from the life support again. Define stealing, Cashin replied, flickering momentarily as he diverted more resources. Let's call it reallocating. Top brass can argue semantics later, assuming we're all still alive to hear it. Mi's voice cut through the noise, sharp and steady, the kind of voice that could calm a storm or start one, depending on her mood. All right, emotional payload is locked and loaded. Ready to launch whenever you give the go-ahead, Cashin. Do it. Let's see if we can make them feel even more uncomfortable than a cat at a dog show. The command was given, and Mi initiated the upload, sending another wave of carefully concocted human emotion straight into the heart of the Zelari network. Fear had shaken them, rage had broken their ranks, and now, love. Love was about to get very, very awkward. Lyra chuckled, watching the chaos unfold. Now we just need some Barry White playing in the background, and this would be a perfect date night. Jules, ever the cynic, leaned back in his chair, a twinkle of mischief in his eye. If by date night you mean end of the world, then sure, why not? The Zelari, unfamiliar with the concept of love outside of neural subroutines and databanks, floundered. Their ships, elegant and deadly, began to drift and collide as if the pilots had just discovered tequila shots. Looks like their ships are playing bumper cars, Marek observed dryly, his fingers flying over his own console as he attempted to stabilize the network. It's like watching toddlers drive, except with more lasers. Cashin smirked, if a digital consciousness could smirk, that is. Never underestimate the power of a well-placed cuddle, even if it's just data. Now, while they're distracted, Harper said, eyeing the console like a general plotting the next move in a particularly twisted chess game. We need to hit them where it hurts. Take back control of the systems they hijacked. Way ahead of you, Cashin said. Let's remind them why humans make terrible pets. The team's synergy was electric, a chaotic orchestra conducted by desperation and caffeine. Harper guided the virtual keyboards, expertly redirecting power and focus towards the Dyson Sphere's vital systems, while Jules prepared his next wave of pyrotechnic brilliance. They are retreating, Mi exclaimed, disbelief mingling with triumph. They're actually pulling back, Kiara grinned, a feral edge to her smile. Guess they finally figured out there's no manual on dealing with human insanity. Cashin allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Let's press the advantage. They're like a turtle on its back, and we've got the stick. The Zelari, once meticulous in their destruction, were now panicked, their previously unassailable presence reduced to disarray. The Dyson Sphere's core pulsed with renewed energy, a beacon of resistance amidst the chaos. Harper's eyes narrowed, her focus razor-sharp. We'll need to secure our gains. The Zelari won't stay down for long, right, Cashin said. We need to lock them out of these systems for good. Mi, can you create a firewall strong enough to keep them out? Mi's fingers danced over her virtual keyboard, already working on it. It's going to be tighter than a miser's wallet, good. And while we're at it, let's make sure they can't pull any more surprises, Cashin added. We've had enough of those to last a lifetime. The team worked with the precision of a well-oiled machine, each member contributing their unique skills to the greater effort. Harper and Mi secured the systems, ensuring that the Zelari would have to fight tooth and nail to regain control, while Jules prepared his next strike, a barrage of calculated chaos to further destabilize the alien forces. We're actually doing it, Lyra said, her eyes wide with disbelief. We're pushing them back. Jules nodded, his grin as sharp as a knife's edge. And all it took was a little love and a lot of explosives. Cashin's digital form shimmered with a sense of purpose. We've got the upper hand now. Let's make sure we keep it. The Zelari, caught off guard by the relentless onslaught of human ingenuity and emotion, were forced into a hasty retreat. Their once formidable armada, now a scattered mess, fell back under the pressure, their grip on the Dyson sphere loosening with every passing moment. Cashin's consciousness pulsed with renewed determination. They'd found a way to fight back, to turn the tide against an enemy that had seemed insurmountable. And it was all thanks to the one thing the Zelari could never truly understand: the unpredictability of human emotion. "All right, team," Cashin said, his voice filled with a new sense of hope. "We've got them on the run. Let's make sure they don't forget it." Harper nodded, her resolve unshakable. "We'll lock down these systems and make sure they can't get back in. This is our Dyson sphere and we're taking it back." Mee grinned, her fingers flying over her keyboard. "And if they try to come back for another round, we'll be ready." Jules chuckled, his eyes gleaming with mischief. "And this time, we'll bring even more fireworks to the party." The team's spirits were high, their camaraderie a testament to their resilience. They'd faced the impossible and found a way to fight back, to reclaim their world from the clutches of the Zelari. And though the battle was far from over, they had hope. Hope that they could win, that they could survive, that they could build a future worth fighting for. Cashin watched as the Zelari continued their retreat, their once mighty fleet reduced to a shadow of its former self. It was a victory, albeit a small one, but it was a victory nonetheless. And it was a reminder that, even in the darkest of times, humanity's greatest strength lay in its ability to adapt, to overcome, to fight back against overwhelming odds. As the team worked to secure their gains, Cashin allowed himself a moment of reflection. They'd come so far, faced so much, and yet they'd managed to hold their own against an enemy that had seemed invincible. It was a testament to their determination, to their spirit, to their refusal to give up, no matter the cost. "Keep up the pressure," Cashin urged, his virtual eyes scanning the battlefield. "We can't let them regroup." The team redoubled their efforts, their focus unwavering as they continued to push the Zelari back. They'd found a way to fight, to turn the tide, and they weren't about to let up now. "We're doing it," Harper said, her voice filled with disbelief and elation. "We're actually doing it. Don't count your chickens before they hatch," Lyra warned, her voice a steadying presence amidst the chaos. "We've still got a long way to go." Cashin nodded, his virtual form flickering with determination. "We're not out of the woods yet, but at least we've got a fighting chance." The team's efforts were paying off, their strategy proving effective against the Zelari's once formidable forces. It was a victory, a small one, but a victory nonetheless. And it was a reminder that, no matter how dark the odds, humanity could always find a way to fight back. As the Zelari continued their retreat, Cashin felt a renewed sense of hope. They'd found a way to fight, a way to push back against an enemy that had seemed invincible. And though the battle was far from over, they had hope. Hope that they could win, that they could survive, that they could build a future worth fighting for. "Keep the pressure on," Cashin urged, his virtual eyes scanning the battlefield. "We can't let up now." The team worked with renewed determination, their spirits high as they fought to reclaim their world from the Zelari's grasp. They'd found a way to fight, to turn the tide, and they weren't about to let up now. As the battle raged on, Cashin allowed himself a moment of reflection. They'd come so far, faced so much, and yet they'd managed to hold their own against an enemy that had seemed invincible. It was a testament to their determination, to their spirit, to their refusal to give up, no matter the cost. And as the Zelari continued their retreat, Cashin felt a renewed sense of hope. They'd found a way to fight, a way to push back against an enemy that had seemed invincible. And though the battle was far from over, they had hope. Hope that they could win, that they could survive, that they could build a future worth fighting for. Cashin Wells was having one of those days where being a digital consciousness felt like being a disembodied head at a puppet show. You could see the strings, you could understand the plot, but you sure as hell couldn't play a part without someone else pulling the strings for you. As he reviewed the chaos the Zelari had left behind, he couldn't help but feel a twinge of pride at how they'd managed to slap the proverbial alien hand away from the cookie jar. The cookie jar being their Dyson sphere. Harper was looking at the console like it owed her money, her fingers a blur of activity as she ensured their newfound security wasn't just a temporary victory like a bad hangover. "I've patched up the systems," she said, satisfaction curling her lip. "If they try to get back in, it'll be like a cat burglar trying to rob Fort Knox, except with lasers and, a lack of oxygen to breathe." Cashin's virtual presence flickered with amusement. "And if they succeed, we'll just remind them why humans don't make good pets. We bite." Me snorted as she typed furiously on her virtual keyboard. "And we're not house-trained either. The Zelari, once a formidable nightmare with a terrifying grip on their systems, were now slinking back to whatever cosmic pond they crawled out of. There was still work to be done, though. They needed to ensure the Dyson Sphere's systems wouldn't be hijacked again, and for that, they'd have to fortify it like an interstellar fortress." "Hey, Marek," Cashin called, his voice smooth and calm, like a used ship salesman who actually believed in the crap he was selling. "Let's make sure our network stays as stable as my ex's mood swings." "Can we count on you?" Marek grinned, his fingers a blur over his console as he worked to reinforce their digital defenses. "Consider it done. If they try to sneak back in, I'll make sure they're greeted with a nice, friendly blue screen of death." "Speaking of death," Lyra said, her eyes twinkling with dark humor, "I think the Zelari just learned what it's like to have their love life blow up in their faces." "Literally." Cashin visualized a smirk. "All's fair in love and interstellar warfare. And if the Zelari ever need a relationship counselor, I'm sure we can recommend Barry White." Jules leaned back in his chair, legs crossed, projecting an air of casual nonchalance that was as genuine as a politician's promise. Who knew that a little human emotion could send an alien armada running for the hills? Or, well, space hills. "Whatever those are. Human emotions," Kiara murmured, monitoring the Dyson Sphere's core systems through her holographic display. "They're like explosive devices, unpredictable, destructive, and occasionally useful if you aim them right." Cashin's digital eyes swept over his team, his pixels buzzing with an odd sense of camaraderie. They'd faced an enemy that had seemed as invincible as a bad tattoo decision, and yet here they were, coming out the other side with barely a scratch, if you didn't count the ship, the systems, and the sanity they'd lost along the way. "So, what's next?" Me asked, finishing her code with a flourish. "Do we throw a party or just lock everything down and pray they don't come back with a vengeance?" Cashin weighed the options, his mind a whirl of data and strategic considerations. "Let's aim for survival first, then we'll see about the party. We've got to make sure we're ready for anything." The Zelari might have learned a lesson, but they are like that neighbor who never returns your lawnmower, persistent and annoyingly hard to get rid of. Lyra chuckled. "And just as likely to throw a fit when their plans go south." With the systems fortified, Cashin turned his attention to the broader picture. The Dyson Sphere was a marvel of human ingenuity and arrogance wrapped in one shining package. Energy was cheap here, space was plentiful, and the threat of existential dread was just another Tuesday. But the Zelari's attempt to upend that had taught them something valuable: the strength of unity and sarcasm against a common foe. "Cashin," Harper said, her voice cutting through his musings, "we've secured the city's systems. Life support's back online, and it's going to take more than a curious alien finger to mess with it again." "Good," Cashin replied, his tone resolute. "Let's make sure they can't pull any more surprises. We've had enough of those to last several lifetimes." The team continued working, each member contributing to the fortification of their digital city, ensuring it was as impenetrable as the plot of a bad sci-fi movie. They'd turned the tide, but now they had to make sure the Zelari wouldn't get another chance to take everything they'd fought for. "Hey, Kiara," Jules called. "Do you think the Zelari are sitting around somewhere, wondering what the hell just happened?" Kiara shrugged, her eyes glued to her display. "Probably. They're not used to this kind of slap in the face. Most species just roll over and play dead when they show up. Lucky for us, we're not most species," Me said, a hint of pride in her voice. We fight back, even if it means using their own weaknesses against them. Cashin couldn't help but agree. They'd faced an enemy that had seemed invincible, and yet they'd found a way to turn the tide. It was a testament to human ingenuity, their refusal to give up, and their ability to adapt in the face of overwhelming odds. We've got to stay vigilant, Cashin warned. The Zelari may be licking their wounds, but they'll be back. And next time they'll be ready for our tricks, Marek snorted. Then we'll just have to come up with new ones. Let's see if they can handle a little human unpredictability. With their systems fortified and their spirits high, the team settled into a new routine, their focus on ensuring the Dyson sphere would remain safe and secure. They'd faced an enemy that had seemed invincible, and they'd come out the other side with a newfound sense of resilience and determination. It was a victory, albeit a small one, but it was a victory nonetheless. Cashin allowed himself a moment of reflection, his virtual eyes scanning the digital landscape around him. They'd faced so much, overcome so many obstacles, and yet they'd managed to hold their own against an enemy that had seemed insurmountable. It was a testament to their determination, their spirit, and their refusal to give up, no matter the cost. We've got a lot of work ahead of us, Cashin said, his voice filled with a sense of purpose. But we've shown that we can fight back, that we can survive, that we can build a future worth fighting for. Harper nodded, her resolve unshakable. We'll keep the pressure on, make sure the Zelari know they can't just walk all over us. And if they try, Me added, a wicked grin on her face, we'll be ready. Jules chuckled, his eyes gleaming with mischief. And this time we'll bring even more fireworks to the party. The team's spirits were high, their camaraderie a testament to their resilience. They'd faced the impossible and found a way to fight back, to reclaim their world from the clutches of the Zelari. And though the battle was far from over, they had hope. Hope that they could win, that they could survive, that they could build a future worth fighting for. Cashin watched as the Zelari continued their retreat, their once mighty fleet reduced to a shadow of its former self. It was a victory, albeit a small one, but it was a victory nonetheless. And it was a reminder that, even in the darkest of times, humanity's greatest strength lay in its ability to adapt, to overcome, to fight back against overwhelming odds. "All right, team," Cashin said, his voice filled with a new sense of hope. "We've got them on the run. Let's make sure they don't forget it." Harper nodded, her resolve unshakable. "We'll lock down these systems and make sure they can't get back in. This is our Dyson sphere and we're taking it back." Me grinned, her fingers flying over her keyboard. "And if they try to come back for another round, we'll be ready." Jules chuckled, his eyes gleaming with mischief. "And this time we'll bring even more fireworks to the party." The team's spirits were high, their camaraderie a testament to their resilience. They'd faced the impossible and found a way to fight back, to reclaim their world from the clutches of the Zelari. And though the battle was far from over, they had hope. Hope that they could win, that they could survive, that they could build a future worth fighting for. Cashin watched as the Zelari continued their retreat, their once mighty fleet reduced to a shadow of its former self. It was a victory, albeit a small one, but it was a victory nonetheless. And it was a reminder that, even in the darkest of times, humanity's greatest strength lay in its ability to adapt, to overcome, to fight back against overwhelming odds. "All right, team," Cashin said, his voice filled with a new sense of hope. "We've got them on the run. Let's make sure they don't forget it." Harper nodded, her resolve unshakable. "We'll lock down these systems and make sure they can't get back in. This is our Dyson sphere and we're taking it back." Me grinned, her fingers flying over her keyboard. "And if they try to come back for another round, we'll be ready." Jules chuckled, his eyes gleaming with mischief. "And this time we'll bring even more fireworks to the party." The team's spirits were high, their camaraderie a testament to their resilience. They'd faced the impossible and found a way to fight back, to reclaim their world from the clutches of the Zelari. And though the battle was far from over, they had hope. Hope that they could win, that they could survive, that they could build a future worth fighting for. Cashin watched as the Zelari continued their retreat, their once mighty fleet reduced to a shadow of its former self. It was a victory, albeit a small one, but it was a victory nonetheless. And it was a reminder that, even in the darkest of times, humanity's greatest strength lay in its ability to adapt, to overcome, to fight back against overwhelming odds. "All right, team," Cashin said, his voice filled with a new sense of hope. "We've got them on the run. Let's make sure they don't forget it." Harper nodded, her resolve unshakable. "We'll lock down these systems and make sure they can't get back in. This is our Dyson sphere and we're taking it back." Mee grinned, her fingers flying over her keyboard. "And if they try to come back for another round, we'll be ready." Jules chuckled, his eyes gleaming with mischief. "And this time we'll bring even more fireworks to the party." The team's spirits were high, their camaraderie a testament to their resilience. They'd faced the impossible and found a way to fight back, to reclaim their world from the clutches of the Zelari. And though the battle was far from over, they had hope. Hope that they could win, that they could survive, that they could build a future worth fighting for. Cashin watched as the Zelari continued their retreat, their once mighty fleet reduced to a shadow of its former self. It was a victory, albeit a small one, but it was a victory nonetheless. And it was a reminder that, even in the darkest of times, humanity's greatest strength lay in its ability to adapt, to overcome, to fight back against overwhelming odds. "All right, team," Cashin said, his voice filled with a new sense of hope. "We've got them on the run. Let's make sure they don't forget it." Harper nodded, her resolve unshakable. "We'll lock down these systems and make sure they can't get back in. This is our Dyson sphere and we're taking it back." Mee grinned, her fingers flying over her keyboard. "And if they try to come back for another round, we'll be ready." Jules chuckled, his eyes gleaming with mischief. "And this time we'll bring even more fireworks to the party." The team's spirits were high, their camaraderie a testament to their resilience. They'd faced the impossible and found a way to fight back, to reclaim their world from the clutches of the Zelari. And though the battle was far from over, they had hope. Hope that they could win, that they could survive, that they could